Welcome to Podomation, where we talk about all things automation and industrial cybersecurity. Podomation is brought to you by ISA, the International Society of Automation. Welcome to Podomation. I'm Liz Neiman with the International Society of Automation. In this special episode of our podcast, we're going to cover ISA's flagship event, the Automation Summit and Expo, which took place on October 5th through 7, 2025. We had over 630 people in attendance, but hey, if you weren't one of them, don't worry. This episode's going to give you a lot of great detail on what we learned at the event. From the expo floor to the keynote stage at ISA's Automation Summit and Expo, everyone was focused on one idea: adapt faster. Today we'll go deep on security and cyber resilience. We'll explore edge intelligence and how automation informs data to decisions. And we'll hear how immersive training and ISA's community are shaping the next generation. Let's start with the urgent reality: securing operational technology, or OT, in a world where the threats are faster, more automated, and often already inside the perimeter. That brings us to part one of today's podcast: security and cyber resilience. Asset owners are balancing aging systems, converging IT/OT, staffing constraints, and an arms race of increasingly automated attacks. We asked leaders how they're modernizing. Here's Matt Bolick from Fortinet.
So we're seeing a lot of trends in terms of modernization and OT infrastructure, really in response to pressures both internal and external. So externally, we're seeing a lot of advancing in threats that are becoming more automated, more intelligent, with the use of AI tools and machine learning to really improve the success rates of attacks hitting OT and IT environments. We're also seeing a lot of those attacks originating or getting a foothold inside of the firewall, inside of the perimeter, through phishing and email attacks and social engineering, being much, much more successful. I think we're at a point today where in both IT and OT organizations, we've done a pretty good job of securing the perimeter. We really have to look at securing the inside of the network as well. So we're seeing really an arms race with those external attackers really driving the internal forces. So bringing a lot of the lessons that we've learned over the years in IT security, bringing those into the OT environment to modernize that OT infrastructure, because it is seen as being relatively aging and certainly more vulnerable than a lot of the hardened IT networks that we've seen in the past. So with the success of those internal threats, we're seeing a lot of vulnerable OT environments really being more susceptible to those threats.
Resilience also means proving protection and recovering fast, especially for mission-critical OT systems. Here's Mike Bova from Acronis.
Yeah, so we are seeing a lot of challenges around backup of mission-critical machines within the OT space. OT being the money-making part of the business, the factory floors, the refineries, the energy stations, and the ability to do reliable backups and fast recoveries, as well as staying within compliances that they get audited for, is really what we hear about and what we try and address with our customers. So the trends we're seeing within OT is a lot around cyber resiliency, compliances. There is cyber insurance as well that a lot of our customers are having to deal with. And in regards to how we help, right, backup and recovery is always a piece of that. And the ability to know that you're protected, give the reports to show that you're protected to the board and to the auditors and to anyone else that requests it, is where we come in and help. And then those fast recoveries to eliminate and keep downtime as low as possible as well.
At the edge, AI is reshaping deployment, but it's got to work with legacy systems, workflows, and budgets. Here's Sachin Vasudeva from ZEDEDA.
It starts with how they deploy applications at the edge. That's the fundamental issue. But it also gets into the technical challenges in terms of the type of applications, especially with AI, are wide-ranging. So they need different types of hardware. They need a way to be agnostic of the hardware as much as possible. The second challenge is the idea of integration. So integration is a big challenge. So they have legacy systems, legacy applications, legacy workflows. So how do they deploy these new applications with AI, with vision, for example, and that integrate into the legacy infrastructure, including legacy workflows in the backend side. So the third challenge is around deployment itself. So the ease of deployment is a challenge. So when you bring AI and deploy it at the edge, you have to go through a lot of hoops to figure out, is the model working at the edge? Is it optimized for the edge? It may be trained at the central cloud, but deploying it is a very different sort of issue. So technical challenges, deployment challenges, integration challenges with AI and how it's being deployed. Lastly, I think it's also a function of just cost. Uh, Edge computing is extremely cost conscious as a paradigm, as a business. And so how do we make sure that operational costs are minimized with the notion of centralized approaches, just like we have at the data center side? How do we help standardize and how do we help centralize some of the edge computing paradigms to minimize costs?
Wireless safety is another frontier where standardization really matters. We were lucky to have a great exhibit from ISA 100 Wireless at the event this year. ISA 100 is a standard, and it's also a conformity assessment program regarding the interoperability of wireless systems in industrial environments. Here's Adne Olsen representing ISA 100.
ISA 100 is an industrial wireless network. It's similar to wireless HART, but it has some differences, which we like to utilize in our technology. So we are a consortium of members. So it's guaranteed interoperability. So we can basically use any device from any vendor, different infrastructure. So it gives a lot of flexibility to the customer. A special feature for Draeger is that we can also tunnel a foreign protocol. So we put a safety layer inside ISA 100, and we actually do seal to executive action fire and gas detection over ISA 100. This is the only solution in the world to do that right now. So we benefit from that. But once you invest for a safety system, it's good to know that you can also get temperature, flow, and other technologies in. And the wireless market is growing, and we're seeing a need, but we want to avoid the customers having one network for each application. So ISA 100 is a good fit for a multi-vendor solution network.
On the plant floor, segmentation often follows the physical reality, cells, skids, and units. So it's really important to involve those control engineers and instrument techs early. Our security posture also depends on mindset, interrogating our assumptions and our trust boundaries. And speaking of trust, I had a terrific conversation with our day 2 keynote, Tom Liston, who's the owner of Bad Wolf Security. Tom gave a really exciting presentation about thinking like a dirty hacker and how those lessons can be applied in organizations. Here are some segments from my interview with Tom.
Yep. So Tom, you've consulted with so many different organizations, all different industry sectors and in different places around the world, but I'm sure they have some common pitfalls. And I wonder what your advice is for them.
So one of the going back to what I said before, I think one of the most common pitfalls most organizations run into is that one of the things I said in my presentation is we trust us. So we have a VPN connection from the field that comes into our back-end data center. We're going to trust that VPN connection implicitly because it's something we set up and only we are going to connect up to it. That works great up until the point in time which you're not the only person that connects up to it, and then that represents a huge problem.
That's very interesting. And it all comes down to trust, it seems like that is the most common theme.
Who do you trust?
Yeah.
And my advice is trust no one.
What's the old saying? Trust but verify.
Trust but verify.
There's another one.
There you go.
You were saying something about locks being bad security, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it comes down to really the idea of layers, which we talked about as well. And that is, locks are great. They keep honest people honest. But if you know how to pick a lock, it's only going to be a speed bump. And so, in one of the case studies that I talked about during my presentation, that the lock really did act as only a speed bump. We opened up a system, got into it very easily, and the lock was only there. Really, as I said, keep honest people honest. You need to augment your systems. You need to layer your systems. You need to have locks, but you also need to have alarm systems that monitor. If you go to a bank, they have locks on the doors, but they have an alarm system as well. And they might have an armed guard there too. So you've got multiple layers of things, and trusting in one layer, which unfortunately many people tend to do, will end up getting you in trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, we're talking about physical locks,
physical
but also
locks, but metaphorical locks.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's a lot to it. And to the point that you closed your presentation with, it can be a little scary, right?
It is very scary.
Scary out there. Yes. You said you're going to need a bigger boat, right? From Jaws.
You need a bigger boat, yes.
So how scary is it? Are we in for it?
Well, one of the things that I talked about in my presentation was a tool that I had written that monitors for every kind of attack that can take place against the system. It monitors and logs those. And so over a 30-day period for one IP address, and this is just for a typical home IP address on a home-based ISP, I saw over 8 million attacks against that IP address. Comes out to about a little over 3 per second that you're seeing. And so this is monitoring, as I said, every port, every protocol. But that's the kind of world we're living in.
My goodness.
Going back about a year and a half or so, I did the same analysis of the data, same kind of tool running on the same IP address, and it was only about half that much. So we're seeing a pretty steep increase in the number of attacks against IP addresses. And that's the kind of world that our devices are living in right now.
That's really scary.
It is very scary.
And it's such a quick increase too, my goodness.
Very, very quick.
And do you mean people's IP addresses at home?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not just companies that are under attack. Of course,
Correct.
At ISA we talk a lot about the safety of an entire industrial system.
Yes.
But it's a concern, of course, just for regular people as well.
Now, 99% of those attacks fail because you've got your residential firewall, on the IP address coming in, and you don't have anything listening on those ports. But this device that I developed listens on every port, every protocol, so it sees every attack that comes in.
Wow!
So that's what a system on the internet would see, is that kind of attack traffic coming towards it.
That's very scary indeed. We are going to need a bigger boat.
Yes, we are going to need a bigger boat.
Okay, so challenge assumptions, implement trust zones, and favor action. Layer prevention with detection and fast rehearsed response. Sounds like a plan. And sounds like we're ready for part 2, edge intelligence and data to decisions. Everyone has data, but fewer of us can actually turn that into a good decision-making strategy. We heard 2 consistent threads: break silos and prioritize causal insight that leads to action. This is why automation is so important philosophically for a company. It's not just about saving time or money. It's about learning from our data and growing in ways that we couldn't have seen before. That's where the power is. Here's more from Joe Bastone from Honeywell.
There's so many different trends to pick from with automation. I think the biggest one is, how do you evolve those existing systems that are out there to take advantage of new trends like digital transformation? Customers are looking to sweat their assets and get more production out without having to do big capital investments. So they're spending a lot of effort and a lot of time trying to figure out how they can squeeze just a little bit more out of their systems without having to do a ton of work. And there's a lot of data that's trapped in those automation systems that they want to be able to leverage in a much more holistic way. So there's a lot of challenges that customers bring to us. The biggest one is dealing with data silos. There's a lot of different systems that are out there, PLCs, control systems, IT systems, lab systems, and they're trying to make sense of all the data that they've got. But it's a challenge because the data might not be contextualized. It's in a lot of different places. In order to manage that data, they have to do a lot of wrangling first of it to get it into a single environment, so then they can make the decisions from it. So that's a big challenge that they have, is just how do they make sense of it? And that's even before they've decided what they want to do with the data. So we help them with that with new solutions like Haptica from Honeywell.
And once that data is liberated, Instrumentation quality becomes the governor on insight. With trustworthy signals, causal analysis moves from interesting to actionable. Let's hear from Bob Rice at Control Station.
So a lot of the focus in automation is around, from our perspective, around data analytics and trying to understand process behavior and do kind of causal and predictive analysis. We've got a lot of data and a lot of analysis that's been going on, but we haven't been able to use the AI and the predictive side, I think, as efficiently in the past as I think we are starting to now. I think a lot of the focus around artificial intelligence and causal analysis has really opened the doors to doing much more deeper dives into the behavior of a process and doing troubleshooting. Ultimately, at Control Station, we're focused on analyzing the conditions at a plant, at a manufacturing facility, and uncovering and identifying opportunities to improve behavior and improve performance. But for us to be able to do that, we have to identify that. And a lot of the analytics that's been out there has not been great at really doing causal analysis. We're really starting to get into the future of using AI and causal analytics to uncover problems, to build relationships, to solve problems. So some of the biggest challenges that we see is the lack of staffing to support a lot of the opportunities that the customers see. When they start doing projects, they do analytics, they do, just kind of the daily optimization required at the facilities, they generally don't have the staff to actually perform a lot of this task. And so a lot of times they're looking for us to provide force multipliers, whether that's in the role of software and tools or even just staff augmentation. Companies need help. They just don't have the staffing levels they did 15 years ago to do a lot of the studies, to do a lot of the analysis. And so where we're getting a lot of questions from customers around what can they do to provide some sort of force multiplier to their team.
And with the last word, Adne Olsen from ISA 100.
Well, we're saying that we need to enable AI and data-driven decisions. We need to have these wireless industrial networks where we can collect our information. You might have a lower demand for response times. You can use LoRa to collect that information. We have a lot of questions as well about 5G and 6G is all over the place. I still think it will take a long time before you have that on the device layer. But for me, the future will be more unified gateways that will have a backhaul of OT 5G. And then you might have ISO 100, a wireless HART, LoRa, and Wi-Fi in the field. So you don't need to pull any communication cables into the field. Apply the power, pull all the information from the 5G network, and then for the last mile communication, use the appropriate industrial wireless standard.
Data to decisions is a stack: contextualization, instrumentation, causal analytics, edge orchestration, and resilience, so actions are both smart and repeatable. That brings us to part 3 of our podcast, Career Development. The next generation wants impactful work, practical skills, and modern training. This year's standout was immersive simulations that make learning safer, team-based, and memorable. ISA rolled out something really cool at ASE this year, our Student Simulation Showdown, which was demonstrated in partnership with IglooVision and Visco. This immersive VR technology can help provide hands-on experience and training for real-world scenarios that impact critical infrastructure. Let's hear from Brandon Turnage at IglooVision.
Yes, so IglooVision is a company. We're based out of the UK, and we build immersive rooms. So what you see behind me is a 5 by 5 meter structure. It's filled with Panasonic's TAA compliant projectors. What we have are, the way that we do business is through several different projection systems. We can have Epson, Panasonic, Christie's, so just a plethora of different vendors that we choose from to design an immersive space that's custom for every single one of our customers. We do have turnkey environments, so ones that we have pre-built, manufactured, tested, that we deliver and install and train people on how to use. But we also have full retrofit systems where we can build the entire environment custom inside of a space and really dial it in. And what really makes Igloo unique isn't necessarily the hardware on the outside. People have probably seen before immersive structures in the past. What really makes it unique is the software side. So we have the IglooVision, or the Igloo core engine, if you will, software. And what that allows you to do is any content from any source can literally be created into an immersive scene. So globally, we have over 1,000 igloos that have been built in education, in consulting agencies, engineering companies, people doing site and safety training, etc. Here in the United States, we're really starting to get our footprint and expand here as well, and we have over 500 igloos built today. When I think about the most impactful way that the spaces are used, it's really allowing people to get that immersive training or that immersive education experience without having to don a headset, and the uncomfortability that comes with that, and the lack of having someone that's able to be like an instructor in that environment still present. So when we look at our education customers, especially K through 12 and higher education, those folks are walking in there and they said, we don't necessarily remember everything that we're taught in school, but we remember the experiences that we have. And every single time you step inside of an Igloo environment, it's an experience, and it's going to create an impact on that user.
And now from Steve Mustard, an ISA fellow and past president who has been instrumental in developing the project. Steve had this to say.
Well, immersive technologies, virtual reality, AI, all can play a part for operators if they're trying to train people, is a big use case. So it's very difficult, very costly, and very time consuming to train people in operational facilities. And it also introduces a safety risk as well. If you can do training in a facility like this, it's very realistic for people. So it's good for them to experience, but they don't have to necessarily be in the facility. So that can be a huge cost saving as well as a safety improvement as well. It all started with a real incident response exercise that I did in an offshore facility in the Gulf of America. And I went to that facility and did a cybersecurity incident response exercise. And it's very costly and time consuming and risky to do it in that real facility. And I thought we should be able to use technology to be able to simulate that. So we created a 3D version of the facility we tested, and then we used AI to generate the scenario, and we were able to demonstrate that in a headset in a virtual reality environment. And then the next logical thing was to try it out in an immersive room like Igloo. So like the headset, it's immersive experience, but instead you're not wearing a headset. So you can work in a team and you can talk to each other in real time and work through the exercise.
Now let's hear from my colleague Andrea Holovach at ISA, who shared a few of her thoughts as well.
Well, ISA is here for automation professionals, but the students are the next generation. We want to make sure that they're ready for the next generation of automation careers, really meeting students where they are with technology, ready for automation careers. So the Student Showdown, it's a simulation of a tabletop exercise. So I think most of us have done tabletop exercises for safety incidents or cybersecurity incidents. I think of it like a screen reading or a table reading of a comedy show. We build that with our partners at ThreatGen into an AI, a large language model. So instead of just reading from paper, you're actually interacting with an AI with a simulation. We then work with our partners Visco to add the 3D visualization around it. So our students participate either with a MetaQuest headset or with our partners with Igloo. For those of us that don't do so well with the headsets and walk into walls, you can also experience the simulation inside of an Igloo. So you're interacting with that AI. You are, in this case, for this year's showdown, simulating a cyber attack in a manufacturing plant, and you're dealing with robotic arms that have been attacked by ransomware, and you need to solve that. So we're really excited for the next step of this. This was a bit of a proof of concept for us. We wanted to build games that we can freely give to students and even university faculty to enhance the education that they're doing with their students. But the next step is to really put our students in teams, partnering with corporate sponsors to build these simulations for companies. So if you wanted to sponsor a team, you would decide the critical infrastructure incident that you wanted the students to build. We would bring to you our best and brightest students from around the world. They would be working in cross-functional teams across universities, across countries, across languages, and across time zones. We're talking about engineering students, graphic arts students, game design students, and obviously our cybersecurity students. They would build the incident that you gave them. We would take those simulations. We would obviously give the students some feedback. We would score them, and then we would bring our best and brightest to our Automation Summit and Expo, where we would be featuring their designs. So as the corporate sponsor, you're going to define what the students are building for you, whether it's a cyber tabletop exercise or a safety, anything that you need built, proof of concept, what would it look like for your teams to experience it in a 3D immersive environment? it's a great entry into experiencing these incidents in a different way. You also get to work with our very best and brightest students and make sure that you've got the next generation coming into your company.
And finally, our student ambassadors were on hand to share their perspectives. Here's Elijah Bracken.
So I see like manufacturing plants having a 3D model as well as a Matterport model. So you integrate those together and like train different professionals like on the process they're about to use. So I see that as very useful in that sense. So they can get interaction with the environment in a safe manner without having a chance of messing anything up or destroying the process. And be able to simulate that environment with interactables and like a VR headset.
And here's David Sani, another student ambassador.
I think it was definitely an experience getting to come here, the location, first of all. We're here at Disney in Florida, Orlando. It's an amazing place to be. And it's even more amazing when we're here on business, work, and I've had amazing opportunities here networking. And the Igloo is the student simulation showdown with the Igloo is amazing. I think definitely my favorite part of it is the different type of experiences that can be made with the Igloo.
Stay tuned for more coming soon from ISA on the Student Simulation Showdown, as well as our Cybersecurity Escape Room, which you can experience in person at the OT Cybersecurity Summit, coming June 16 through 18, 2026 in Prague. From the next generation to ensuring our current automation professionals are prepared for leadership roles, developing career skills is a huge part of what we do at the Automation Summit and Expo. Leadership and culture are really the multipliers, building psychological safety in the workplace, as well as clarity and opportunity. And I heard time and again from attendees at ASE this year that this next speaker was incredible. Lee Catherine Bonner from Bee Downtown shared lessons learned from the hive, from beekeeping, for leadership. She had this to say.
Bees are like the masters of fast adaptation. So an example of that is honeybees register pressure changes in our environment at a faster pace than we do. So honeybees are an indicator species. So they can tell us about changes in our naturally occurring environment at a faster pace than humans will register it. So indicator species are known as like very, very important species in our world. I like to think of it as like when you're playing Mario and like there's little Mario and then he jumps up and he gets the mushroom and he turns into like Super Mario. So the next level beyond an indicator species is a keystone species. So a keystone species is if this species were to disappear, it would drastically alter the terrain of our natural environment in a way that we might not be able to fully like quickly recover from. Honeybees are also a keystone species, so they are essential. But honeybees can register pressure changes faster than humans can. And so if you're a beekeeper and you're working the bees and all of a sudden they start to get bumpy, and so they'll like bump you and be like, hey, we're kind of done with you keeping us. And you look at the front of the beehive and you see it just a mass return to the hive of all these bees coming back filled with honey stomachs and pollen legs. They're registering there's a pressure change and we need to get back to the hive now because it might start raining and we can't find the rain. So like in a literally like barely any pressure change, they will adjust and adapt to whatever they're doing to come back because they know they need to survive, because the hive needs these bees that are known as the forager bees that are out collecting nectar and pollen and propolis. They can't lose these bees because then we've lost a whole essentially workforce in the hive if they don't make it back. So that's just an example of how quickly they can adapt within their environment. And in our human world, that is essential. Like we saw during COVID, the companies that dug their heels in and said, well, this is how we've done it always, we're not adjusting and adapting, they did not thrive in COVID. And employees who say, I'm not changing, I'm doing it, they don't stay at corporations. They are either asked to leave or they choose to leave. But that adaptation it's just important. It's key to success in our human world these days. And we see it in our natural world, how essential it is too. It's why honeybees have been around for so long, is because they've adapted as our world changed. And if you want your company to be around for a long time, you have to be willing to adapt as the world changes as well.
My conversation with Lee Catherine was seriously so great. I'd like to release it as its own podcast episode, so stay tuned for that. Back to ASE, Leadership Vision showed up in details about ISA's 3-year strategic plan, which was shared at the annual State of the Society address. Here's ISA President-elect Ashley Weckworth with her thoughts.
This year, ISA actually rolled out a 3-year strategy. So it started in January of 2025, and it's going to continue on in 2026. And what we did is we picked 6 key themes that we really wanted to focus on as our strategic priorities. You can see these on our website at isa.org. But some of the themes that I'm most proud of, or like that I'm most excited for in my presidential term, is kind of like improving our culture, showing people how fun it is. We already have a great culture, and just building upon that makes it so inviting to everyone, and it's just a great place to be. You can just feel the difference. I also am excited to just double down on our existing business, keep growing in the great things we've already been doing in our training and our standards. I'm excited to just keep leveraging that. So I just look forward to continuing our 3-year strategy next year. So far this year, I'm proud of lots of things. However, I would say this show is huge this year. The expo at ISA ASE, the Automation Summit and Expo, is just bigger and better than ever. And it's so cool that it's in my local area, that I could just see how many people are representing here. I can talk to local people. I can talk to people all over the world. It kind of gives that variety. And so I'm just most proud of this show and this conference this year. So when I started ISA, I was very involved at the section level. I didn't realize how much ISA had to offer until I attended a society event. So I actually attended a conference that was located in Kansas City, which is where I lived at the time. And that broadened my experience to ISA. I got to hear about their technical areas, their standards, what they were doing in all the events around the world. And I would just encourage anyone out there that is focused on one thing of ISA, start with our website. Start looking at what's all involved in the website. Get on ISA Connect and see all the different committees, all the different groups and forums that you can join, and see where your passion lies, because there might be more out there that you want to engage in. And I would just encourage you to start small, start there, join an event and see what it's all about, and then really just make connections, because building those connections, you're gonna know when that's the next thing you want to do, and you can just continue growing in how much exposure you want within ISA.
I managed to grab a couple of ISA members on site to ask for what they value about their membership in the society. First up, here's Letitia Zarpalon, who's with the ISA Houston section. She works for Audubon companies.
And don't be afraid. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't think that something that you're asking is dumb. Like, nothing is dumb enough to ask. And I can guarantee you, like, all the experts, like anybody that has been working for a lot of years, they were young ones. People we want to see, eager people that want to grow and learn automation. So ask questions.
And here's Felipe Costa, who works for Moxa and is an ISA training instructor.
So it's a very unique environment. Everybody's friendly and try to help with their expertise. So definitely, I'm passionate about ISA members. Is they always trying to help you, and definitely trying to support each other on their challenges. I attended the most here, the ISA Expo, right? Is the one that I came every single year. And I believe that's the only opportunity that I have to see everybody that usually I just see virtually, all the instructors, all the people that I build our community. And there's a very unique aspect of the Expo. That is where you can see the solutions happening, the training. So all the good things from ISA is just one single spot that you can have all of them. So it's networking, it's training, it's also the high level content that all the speakers they bring to the table that actually help you shape and understand what's going to happen in the near future.
Finally, here's Scott Reynolds, ISA president, with his thoughts and takeaways from the Automation Summit and Expo.
I guess the most interesting thing is how excited everyone is about AI, and I thought there'd be a lot more hesitation and more reservations about it, but it's really just pure excitement right now, which is really fun. It's a fun time to be involved in kind of the AI world and being involved in that, and how that's going to impact automation and how automation is going to impact AI. Probably the thing I'm most proud of for ISA is Nemo and rolling that out. It is so cool that we're able to say that we were the first ones to do this awesome thing, and you can actually see people excited about it, and seeing people just taking pictures with a mascot is also just super fun and exciting.
In closing, I want to offer some inspiration from my conversation with our day one keynote, Doug Hurley, who's a retired NASA astronaut. He has such a unique place in spaceflight history. He piloted the final space shuttle flight, and he commanded the first crewed commercial orbital spacecraft with SpaceX. Doug's presentation was enlightening and inspirational, and so many people stayed afterwards to talk to him and hear his perspectives. I'd like to offer a couple of takeaways for you.
It was a pretty significant challenge, certainly at the beginning, just because of where we were coming from. You know, SpaceX at that point was what I would consider still kind of in their startup phase. You know, they were just getting their feet under them. Whereas NASA had been an established organization around for decades. The bureaucracy, frankly, was pretty high. And so, you know, bridging that gap and finding ways to work through the challenges that we had developing Crew Dragon, you know, what certainly took everybody. And what I mean by that is, you know, we had folks certainly with a ton of experience flying crews and what that took, you know, Bob and I included. But I think, you know, we had to be open-minded as we were working through the different challenges, because the folks at SpaceX had, you know, certainly had new ways of addressing a lot of those things. But, you know, we needed to keep in mind those lessons learned from all the experiences we had from a NASA standpoint, and then, you know, bring that best solution to the table as we work through all those different, you know, milestones and different design challenges and different operational challenges and all those things that we had. So, and I think what really worked for us was keeping our team small, not overwhelming, you know, the SpaceX teams with just sheer numbers of people, and, you know, being able to respond quickly, being able to adjust quickly, all those things, frankly, that cost you when you're in a fairly large bureaucratic organization. So we were tried really hard to keep things streamlined, be responsive, be there when we needed to be there to work through different issues, challenges, design criteria, all those things. And I think it really paid dividends. And, you know, we built a good rapport with their teams, and you know, clearly we were ultimately very successful in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, you're talking 5 to 6 years between, you know, kind of the design, the ultimate design of the vehicle, and when we actually flew it, which is pretty impressive.
That is super impressive. So interesting. And I think to be part of a real watershed moment like that is significant and surely was meaningful to you. But it's not your first watershed moment, right? You were part of the final space shuttle program, final space shuttle mission, rather. For so many of us Gen X babies in particular, that shuttle program is so meaningful. And it's just wrapped up in a lot of emotion for people and a lot of wonder, really. So I wondered, what does it mean to you to have been part of that and part of the end of that era?
Oh, it was, yeah, it certainly was a, you know, a career defining moment and a personal, you know, just highlight in my life to be, you know, considered to be part of that, and, you know, to be on that final crew. And then, you know, embrace that responsibility, not only to represent those thousands of people over the course of a 30 plus year program, and then, of course, you know, bottom line, execute the mission successfully. And, you know, you feel a big weight to be able to do that just generically anytime you're doing a space flight. But I think this had that little bit of added emphasis because it was, you know, the last flight of this heralded program that you know, folks at NASA and contractors around the country, you know, there were many people that was their whole career, start to finish was the shuttle program. And so, just maybe a deeper responsibility there. But yeah, just an incredible experience. And it all happened, what I would say, relatively fast. By the time we were assigned and flew, it was less than a year. I think it was around 9 months, and then the fact that we were a crew of 4 rather than a crew of 6 or 7, which was typical of the space shuttle missions, added to that. But we came together very quickly as a crew and got to work and work through all those different challenges that come along for a shuttle flight going to the International Space Station. But I couldn't be prouder of the way things turned out. And the crew was incredible. Our mission control teams, the training teams, the folks at Kennedy Space Center, and then to be there on July 21st, 2011 on the runway with all those folks that had put so much into the mission was a really, as I said, just an incredible highlight in my life and certainly in my career.
I wondered, looking forward, what do you think is next for space flight and space exploration?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of different things now, and it's exciting. And I would argue wholeheartedly that that flight that we did in 2020, the demonstration mission to the first test flight of Crew Dragon with crew kind of was the start of a lot of this. And what I mean by that is, you prior to that, you had commercial providers sending supplies, resupply to space station, among other things. And then that, morphed into the commercial crew program, which we were part of, to fly crews. And then now you're seeing commercial companies, SpaceX, Blue Origin, of course, Northrop Grumman, which I'm a part of, still supporting human spaceflight missions, as well as, some new companies that are building commercial space stations, Starlab, Vast, those types of companies. And so you're seeing this commercial economy in low Earth orbit with human spaceflight that's starting to take hold. We'll see where it goes, but it's exciting, and there's a lot of promise and purpose. I think, the other side of it is Artemis. Artemis 2, will be launching here pretty soon. That's the first crewed spaceflight around the moon since 1972. So very exciting to see that happen, sooner rather than later. And then ultimately the goal of landing our astronauts on the moon again and establishing a base. And then ultimately that next step to Mars. And I think the blueprint is there for those types of things, because it's not going to be like it was in that Apollo era, that Apollo space race, where you had unlimited dollars for NASA and unlimited, abilities to be able to do things politically. And so when we do take that step to Mars, it's going to be a public-private, conglomeration, frankly, and also, national space agencies, because you're going to have to share the risk, you're going to have to share the cost, you're going to have to share the entire proposition, literally with the world. And you can see some of that already taking place with the Artemis Accords, which is, I quickly lose track, but I think the number of countries that have signed the Artemis Accords is in excess of 50. And so you can see there's going to have to be that type of commitment to do that human flight to Mars, because otherwise it's just one company or one organization probably can't share that entire burden, just with technology, with risk, with cost, with all those things. So it's exciting. And I think all these seeds are planted, and some stuff is going to happen very soon, as I said, with Artemis 2. And that crew of 4 flying around the moon here next spring. And then we just go from there. But it's really, really exciting to see just the diversity of contribution in certainly in human space flight, certainly compared to, what we lived through not that long ago, where we, as we just talked about, the end of the shuttle program and what were we going to do and what were the aspirations of our country and our space agency and all those things. And, it was a pretty low period, frankly, because that previous moon program had been canceled. Project Constellation had been canceled. So there was really a lot of soul searching to see, what we could do and how we could do it. And I think that those decisions to continue with commercial cargo and then commercial crew, and then how we've kind of evolved in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, you're talking, 15, 16 years since the end of the shuttle program, or 14, I guess. I can't do math in public. But anyway, it hasn't been that long, and where we are now and what we are about to do regarding Artemis, as well as some of the other things, is just really exciting.
Pushing beyond and taking action. That's what the story is all about. It's also about a community that invests in people. That's the ISA Automation Summit and Expo. I want to thank you for joining me in this dive into our conference, and I hope you'll join us next year. We'll be in Prague for the OT Cybersecurity Summit. That's June 16 through 18, 2026. And we'll be in Orlando again for the Automation Summit and Expo on September 27 through 29, 2026. To go deeper, explore ISA training, standards, other programs, please visit us at isa.org. Please don't forget also to subscribe to Podomation. We appreciate it. I'm Liz Neiman for ISA. Thanks for listening.
This has been Podomation, brought to you by the International Society of Automation. Thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people to find our content. Podomation is produced by me, Liz Neiman, and Morgan Fora at ISA. Our music is by Mixer Drummer and has been licensed from Pond 5.